Welcome back to the show we call the Playmakers, and we are on the precipice of the U.S. Open, which tees off tomorrow. So thankfully, we're joined by one of the best who covers the sport and has been doing so for 25 years as a golf writer for Sports Illustrated. He's a partner of the Fire Pit Collective and the man who literally wrote the book on Phil Mickelson, Phil, the Unauthorized Biography. Alan Shipnuck joins us. All Insider Calls are powered by BetQL. Bet smarter and beat the books. Download your BetQL app today or visit BetQL.com.
As Adrian just outlined, I don't think there's a more qualified person to discuss one of the most relevant stories of our modern day, gas prices. Alan, how much did that plane ticket to London cost? Because if the miles weren't worth it, that picture with Greg Norman certainly was.
Yeah, that was a moment. Yeah, I was on the fence about going over there. I had some misgivings for a variety of reasons, but once Phil decided to make that his return to public life, Phil Mickelson, I just felt like I had to be at that first LIV event, also known as sort of the Saudi Golf League, and it was the right choice. It was a big moment for the sport. It really was. I mean, the whole landscape of professional golf is changing before our eyes, and I just I took some criticism from people who say, no, you're legitimizing sports washing, but it's, I'm an impartial observer. I was there just to see how it was all going to play out and tell the story about it.
Sports journalism is wild to me, Alan, because you start a project with the intention to tell a particular story, and then you start digging, and then sometimes you find gems, and then sometimes, like you said, the universe aligns, and you're all of a sudden right in the middle of a huge moment for golf. I'm not sure if you've seen the documentary Icarus about the Russian state-sponsored doping system, but your story is giving off very similar vibes, and you've covered Phil for years, and so I instead of asking what is he like, what's his personality, I think he puts it on a big display, but what about him still surprises you or has caught you off guard?
Well, just he's spent more than 3 decades at the front ranks of the game. He's an unparalleled run of longevity, any sport, any athlete, and yet he's constantly evolving and changing, and he's a bit of a shapeshifter, and so. Even after, my first year covering the PGA Tour was 1994. That was Phil's second full season, so I've been tracking him this whole time. He continues to sort of transform. He's like, and this is one of the more unexpected twists. This beloved fan favorite's kind of taken his heel turn, and now in some ways he's a bad guy, and he very well could play a part in the demise of the PGA Tour. Like, who could have ever seen that coming? So it's just remarkable how he's always at the center of things. He's always working an agenda. Controversy just engulfs him regularly, and he always emerges and keeps going. And that's going to happen this week in Boston. I mean, the fans are on his side. I don't know if you've seen any clips from the practice rounds. He's getting a lot of love out there. I mean, whatever it is about Phil, he's got a certain charm, and people want to watch him play golf. They want to cheer for him, and so I'm constantly amazed at his ongoing evolutions.
I'm not really surprised that he's getting a lot of love in Boston because we all know about those Bostonian sports fans and where their allegiances and I should say integrity lies.
And Alan, I do want to clarify too. Greg Norman is not here. His security goons are not here as well. But something I've noticed is, so Greg Norman tried to branch away in the 90s with Fox and Rupert Murdoch. And Rory, after his win over the weekend, he said the comment towards Greg about having one more victory. Like, all business aside with the PGA and the LIV Tour, this seems to be a very personal thing to these guys, correct?
Yeah, well, Greg Norman has been a polarizing figure for a long time and a bit of a pariah in the game. And now the casual fan didn't know that, but some of the animosity you're seeing, that some of the shade, that's now coming to light. But yeah, these guys are taking it personally because their livelihoods and their legacies are being affected. So Rory, John Rahm, and Justin Thomas have kind of thrown their lot into the PGA Tour. But if 2 dozen or 3 dozen other top players go to LIV, that devalues the product. I mean, these guys are going to rock up the tournaments, and there's going to be a lot of top players missing, and so their victories have less meaning, and the audience shrinks, and their corporate deals shrink as a result of that. And so there's a personal element, and there's the professional element, and there's a lot of indignation flowing both ways. And the commissioner of the PGA Tour, Jay Monahan, has made it personal. His comments about you don't have to ever apologize for being a PGA Tour member, and so it's a mix of the dollars, but it's also so there's a self-righteousness. There's an element of vengeance and all this. There's a lot of big human themes that are getting played out. It's quite riveting.
Yeah, I think it's a great representation kind of what we're going through as a society as well, of the almost kind of a rage against the machine type of mentality. But there's certainly reason to be frustrated with the PGA Tour as well. And that's like we've had several conversations about LIV Golf and just this course that we've been on and just how there's merit on both sides and that there is badness on both sides. And whether or not Phil Mickelson is personally motivated by his ego or his propensity to build up debt, he has been that catalyst that is going to potentially not ruin everything, but change everything. So other than sending Rory and Jon Rahm and Spieth and all them up to defend the PGA's honor, how should they play this next shot? Because, they've suspended all the golfers that are associated with LIV Golf. I know that the USGA came out and said we're not going to do any knee-jerk reactions, but that's just for this year's majors. I'm more worried about next year's majors and people choosing sides, because that's what's going to happen, especially with sponsorship dollars.
This isn't the majors. It's not their fight.
Right.
Augusta National, the PGA of America, the USGA, and the RNA, each of these ruling bodies and these entities, they get the spotlight for 1 week per year, and they have one tournament that really matters to them. No disrespect to the U.S. Women's Open and the Senior Open, but the U.S. Open is what drives the USGA. And so a turf war between rival professional circuits is not their concern. What they care about is putting on the best possible event. They want all their past champions. They want all the big stars. They want as much depth of field and world ranking points as they can get. So they really don't want to get in the middle of this. It's just not their battle. And the idea that Augusta National is going to ride to the rescue of the PGA Tour and ban all these LIV golfers, I think it's fantastical. I mean, Phil Mickelson, 3-time champ, Dustin Johnson, who's from the South, who's one of the most popular guys there. The Masters doesn't want to lose them. They're box office draws, and they add to the competition. So I think so with the PGA Tour, if the majors is not going to save the tour. And anecdotally, being here at the U.S. Open, I'm hearing a lot of buzz from people associated with LIV that, another question is, will the world ranking body give points to these LIV events? Because that's how that becomes their entry into the majors, by being top 50. And according to folks who in the know, that's basically a done deal. It hasn't been announced, but they've had a lot of dialogue. And the world ranking has to acknowledge these tournaments. There's just too many good players there now. So therefore, what does the tour do? I mean, I think they need to concede defeat and cut a deal. And they can, they forged a strategic alliance, to use their term, with the European Tour, and I think they're going to wind up doing the same thing with the LIV Tour, because it's the only workable compromise. It doesn't help the PGA Tour to lose stars and lose popular players, and it doesn't help their sponsors, doesn't help their fans. So there's a middle ground here. You keep your tour membership. The tour absorbs these LIV events, push them all into the fall when there's not a lot of great golf being played. The players get to cash in because they can cherry pick this huge money purses. The Saudis get what they want, which is legitimacy. That's all they really care about. And if they get the stamp of approval on the PGA Tour, then they've definitely arrived as part of the sport. And there's really no downside other than the taint of the Saudi money, which is considerable. But professional golfers have already answered that question. Like, how much do they really care? Other than a handful, they don't care. I mean, they've been going to Saudi Arabia for years now, playing in the European Tour event. They play all over China, where they have actual concentration camps. They play United Arab Emirates. They play in Qatar. Like, the pro golfers are going to follow the money. That's just the bottom line. They've made that clear. So it's not a palatable choice for the PGA Tour, but if they don't want to be relegated to essentially the minor leagues, then I think they're going to have to go that direction.
And Alan, I just want to get a sense, the craziness that was everything that went on in London, and of course your experience there, and even now getting to the U.S. Open, and kind of What's the general sense and feel of the media covering this, of the craziness that's happened these past few weeks, and the craziness that's going to be happening here ahead?
Koepka hates him.
Yeah, well, you know what's ironic is, I mean, Koepka's a prime candidate to go over to LIV.
1,000%.
He's always made his disdain clear for the everyday tour events, and they're just fillered for him between the majors. So you throw him to LIV, you can play less, you can make a heck of a lot more, and you can still play the majors. So I wouldn't be surprised if Brooks changes jerseys. And his comments were interesting. When he was asked this week, like, why have you stayed with the PGA Tour? And he's like, well, there was never another option. It wasn't the most ringing endorsement for his happiness on the PGA Tour. So I think Brooks is in play. Obviously, his brother played, Chase Koepka played in the first event in London. So, yeah, it's going to be a tumultuous summer. I mean, this is just going to be the story. Things are happening very quickly, and there's endless amounts of back channel communication. There could be lawsuits. There's already a lot of bars going on in press conferences, and it's messy, but it's also riveting.
Yeah, and there's an argument to be made that this is really good for the sport, but like you said, there's dirty money everywhere, and so I always say, well, let's not throw things at glass houses when we are actually in one ourselves. But I like to make the joke that I cover and talk about sports, but I'm not a journalist because I majored in communications, which is basically the same, but with less integrity. And so I'm sure Phil isn't the first person to come back at you with the energy that was off the record. I don't like what you wrote, but I'm genuinely curious about what you tell yourself inside your head when the pitchforks come for the messenger that happens to be you.
Well, he is actually the first person who's ever made that claim, which is a serious claim to make against a reporter. And, he knows it's false. I know it's false. Like, that conversation was always on the record. And I'd gone to Phil 3 times to do interviews for the book, face to face. He thought about it. He declined. But ultimately, in the final analysis, he just couldn't help himself. Like, it's been said many times about Phil, he needs to be the smartest guy in the room. And he couldn't stand the idea that he was winning all these political battles, and he'd outsmarted Greg Norman, he'd outsmarted Jay Monahan, and that I didn't know all that when I was writing my book. And he had to pick up the phone and tell me.
Had to fill you in.
He had to fill me in.
Yeah.
And in the context of how many times I'd asked to interview him for the book, if he calls me, every single syllable is going in the pages of the book, unless we expressly agree otherwise. He never asked to go off the record, and if he had, I would have pushed back really hard. This is my one chance to talk to him for the book. So, I think most people saw through that as sort of this transparent, bad faith attempt to rewrite history. But those were his true feelings, and it was a moment of honesty. And when Phil picked up the phone, did he mean to tell me all that stuff? I can't say that. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I know when people start talking, they get emotional, they get carried away by the moment, the sound of their own voice, and maybe he said some things he hadn't planned on saying, but that's on him. It's not my job to govern Phil Mickelson. He's a very smooth operator when it comes to the media, and he had an agenda when he picked up the phone to call me, and it's certainly disappointing that he tried to backtrack, but I mean, I'll go to my grave knowing that whole conversation was on the record.
Yeah, if anything, I think it's a skill and a testament to your ability as a journalist to get people lathered up and going. That's exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, well, I'm just giving them space to tell me what they want to tell me. My biggest tool when I'm doing an interview is just silence. I just listen and prod them here and there. But Phil had a lot he wanted to say. I mean, I hardly said a word in that whole conversation. He was just going 1,000 miles an hour. But yeah, I mean, it's a learned skill for sure.
And Alan Shipnuck joining us. He is the author of the Unauthorized Biography. And since we are talking about Phil and we are here in Las Vegas, I know that Phil Mickelson enjoys some things that we specialize here in Vegas. So I have to ask you, throughout the book, is there a specific Vegas story that involves Phil that you enjoyed or that you covered in the book?
Well, yeah, I mean, the best one is when it's opening day of the NFL season, and he gets a bunch of buddies, and they fly in his jet from Scottsdale to Vegas. And, it's like 8 guys, and they go to this. They get there early, before the first games are played. And they go down to the sports book, and they're going to place their bets. And everyone's kind of milling around. They're not sure what's the protocol. Phil's the host, so they're going to let him go first. But he looks at them and he's like, no, you guys go ahead because when I place my bets, it might move the line.
Oh, my God.
I mean, yeah, let that sink in. And so Tom Candiotti, the old big league pitcher, he was part of that crew, and he's the one who told me the story. And he said that Phil swept the whole morning slate. He won every game. And at that point, he was up over $1 million. And Phil had a big afternoon, only lost a game or two. So at that point, he's up, $1.5 million, $1.6 million, who knows? And then that's just in one day of football betting. But then they're going to fly home that night, and Phil want to go down and play baccarat in the casino, and gave most of it back. And Candiotti said they needed to pull Phil out of there with a rope, basically, and then he sulked all the way to the airport. So it gives you some insight into how much he bets and how fast it comes and goes.
I mean, I have trouble walking away from the tables, but man, it's just a different thing. But that's what happens when you're leather jacketed Uncle Phil with a God complex, right, Alan? It's just you think that you can do no wrong and that every run is going to go on for forever.
Yeah. I mean, the leather jacket, that was a funny touch. But yeah, I mean, it's been said so many times about Phil, he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. He has to feel that way. And, the house always wins, but Phil thinks he's smarter than the house. History would suggest otherwise.
Mm. Well, Alan, you're certainly the smartest person in our room and our ear holes right now. And I, again, want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule, especially with the U.S. Open starting tomorrow, to speak with us, give us a little bit of a roundabout about your book, because I'm really excited to read it. But be well and give my best, or give our best, I should say, to Greg Norman, my friend.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Alan Shipnuck from Fire Pit Collective, writing that big book on Phil Mickelson. He has been in the center of all of this. And let me tell you, they're going to do some 30 for 30s on this very story. On the other side of the break, after we go through our sponsors, which are always brought to us by BetQL when we have